Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. It's that time again. It's 12:30. It's Thursday afternoon. I'm Paul John Dykes, and I'm delighted to be joined by John Paul Mason. JP, you've been away for a couple of weeks. You've been missed. And I think, you know, when you're away, when you're globetrotting, and you do that quite a bit, and it's great, there's always the challenge of watching Celtic when you're away. I know that you go to every home game, you go to loads of the away games, but you also do a bit of travelling, and that does interfere with your Celtic supporting life. So how did you enjoy the Motherwell game before we get to last night?
Well, I was in a hotel room. First of all, I was away for my mate's 40th. He didn't get a bachelor party, a stag do. Been in America for 6 days and I'm calling it a bachelor party. He didn't get a stag do because of COVID, and he's just had a wee girl. So he's got a 7-month-old baby, Isabella, and his wife very kindly gave him the permission to go to Louisville and Nashville for a bourbon extravaganza, because he's into whiskey and he does a YouTube channel at Drinks Whiskey, so he makes content online and all that. So yeah, he wanted to do that, and he asked me to go with him, and because I hadn't been to Kentucky or Tennessee, and there were 2 more states to add to my list, I was like, right, I'm going. Plus I wanted to go and hang out with him as well, so that's why I was away. And yeah, I was in a hotel room on Sunday morning, so it would have been 8 a.m. American time. The game was on, and we'd had a pretty heavy night out the night before. We went to see Journey, the band Journey, and Toto in the KFC arena in Louisville, and yeah, we had a pretty heavy night out. So I woke up, I missed my alarm, woke up, and he'd sent me a message with the Motherwell goal. So I woke up at 1-0 at half time, spent frantic few minutes trying to get some sort of stream. Sky doesn't work when you're in America. BBC for comedy, couldn't get a stream to work on my phone. Eventually found via YouTube an Indian kids sports channel where I don't really think he had any interest really in the game. He was calling it Fire Park and mispronouncing all the names and everything else. He was obviously just doing it for the sake of it, but he had the commentary but no visuals, and that is torture to listen to a game and not be able to see it. And then it cut off in the 90th minute, so I was at 1 each. I'm refreshing the Sky Sports News app on the commentary bit, and then it just popped to 2-1, and I went absolutely bananas. Probably woke quite a few folk up in the hotel celebrating a goal, but and then obviously get the third to put the icing on the cake. But it was stressful.
The thing is with that, you know, you're bringing back kind of old school occasions where you would be checking scores on the CFAX or Oracle, whatever one you use, the teletext, and you know, tuning in to a dodgy FM signal probably back then. But aye, there you go, all the technology in the world, JP, and you couldn't get the Celtic game against Motherwell. But I think after that, what we've been talking about all week, what we had been talking about is, you know, just trying to replicate the end of that game, the second half of that game, take it into the match last night against Dundee, and see if we could do it for the entirety of the game. A lot of people might argue that we didn't do that, but obviously the first half performance in particular, JP, was unreal last night. And I'm guessing you were at the game. You'd returned, you went straight to the game?
I got back on Tuesday night. Our flight got cancelled from Nashville. We had a direct flight from Nashville to London, and we got a text on Sunday. Well, we were in Glasgow, Kentucky, believe it or not. We were driving from Louisville to Nashville, and Glasgow was on the way, so we had to stop there. And we got a text when we were there saying that they cancelled our flight due to operational constraints. So we had to then choose the best option to get home, which was Nashville to Miami, and then Miami to London. And then I had a train back from London to Glasgow on Tuesday, and then kind of tried to piece myself together yesterday and made the game. I arrived into the ground ashamedly about 10 seconds before Carter Vickers scored that goal. But given that I was still on, like, American time, I think I did all right to get there at all.
You did.
And a £20 taxi to get there as well, because buses are just not what they used to be. So it was a frantic way to get there. But arrived, and then everybody round about just went, "Oh, you timed that well," because I mean, I just sat in my seat, and then bang, the goal went in. So, and then the floodgates opened after that, and I think everybody was just in genuinely kind of shock. There was a kind of collective of sort of stunned figures as we were watching this unfold, because it's just a case of where has this been? You know, where has this been kind of hiding for most of the season? Obviously, we've scaled heights against Atletico Madrid at home, beating Rangers twice, but there's never been anything like that last night. And in actual fact, I said to Sean that sits behind me, I was like, when was the last time we were 6-0? Have we ever been 6-0 up?
I asked the question. I asked the question last night, because in my kind of lifetime, the big, we've had a couple of 7 scorelines. I remember we beat St Mirren 7-0 at Celtic Park a couple of times. And the first time I seen it, the OG was scored by John Potter, who used to play for Celtic. He left the school on an S form, having played for Valleyfield Boys Club, and he left to play for Celtic. I think he ended up captain in the reserve team. But he made a career for himself with Clyde, St Mirren, Dunfermline, and he scored at Celtic Park. And I can tell you certain members of his family would have been delighted with that. It was a fine header, if I remember right, and it was 7-0. But I think that the biggest scores that I've seen in my Celtic supporting life were 9-0 Aberdeen at Celtic Park.
We'll see on that. When I asked Sean about the 6-0, and he was like, 9-0 Aberdeen, or somebody else said 9-0 Aberdeen. And then we looked it up, and we weren't 6-0 up at halftime. I think we were 4 at halftime. And he said, I'll never forget that. That was my 50th birthday, and it was the night I met Mike Tyson. And I went, what? I was like, where does that come from? He says, I've got a thing signed and everything else. But he says, a lovely guy as well. And I went, how the hell? And he was at Mark Hall. Must have been for his dinner or something like that at Mark Hall for his 50th. And Mike Tyson had a whole floor at Mark Hall. So, and then he met him. I didn't get the exact detail, whether it was at the bar or playing pool or what, but he's met Mike Tyson, and he's got his autograph, so that was pretty mad. But yeah,
that's incredible memory, incredible. But that game, I remember Mark McGee was the manager of Aberdeen at the time, and I think that it probably resulted in him getting sacked a few weeks later. And then 9-0 last season against Dundee United, of course. That was quite a rapid goal scoring feat as well. I'd need to check what the halftime score was then. And then we beat Arbroath. Can you remember we beat Arbroath?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it was 9-0. They might have scored though. I'd need to check that. Did the boy Tosh maybe score for Arbroath? I'd need to look at that one. But that's the 3 9s that I remember, JP. But 6-0 at half time, you're looking at that situation and you're thinking, well, no mercy. 10. Let's go for 10, because let's really put them to the sword. Not because you want to punish Dundee per se, but because of the goal difference. You want to be able to claw back that goal difference. We're in a title fight. It's really tight. And I want to talk all the way through each of the goals and the performances and really ask that question, JP, where's this been all season? What made the difference last night? And there's obviously been a bit of controversy surrounding Brendan Rodgers, comments made after the Motherwell game. And obviously he said that Celtic will write our own story. I thought it was a great line, by the way. A really, really good line.
Apparently stolen that from Clement. I don't know. That seems to be the narrative on Twitter this morning, that he's stealing his patter. But
Twitter's a strange place, and the patter found within Twitter is a strange situation and experience as well, JP, honestly. I mean, I've been using it now, I think maybe 13, 14 years, and I'm still surprised every single day by certain comments on Twitter. Bizarre is all I can say. But yes, I'm going to give it to Brendan. Obviously, Brendan gave us a good documentary suggestion as well, a recommendation, JP. I don't know if you watched that interview.
I shared it with the players, and classic Brendan.
Brilliant. I loved it. Honestly, I just loved it, because I think our relationship this season with Brendan Rodgers has been up and down. I mean, you were there at the St Rocks game, and when he walked on that pitch at halftime, it was an unbelievable experience, wasn't it? I mean, it was incredible that he came out for the community up at James McGrory Park that day. And at that point, we'd seen him saving the wee fan, the wee pitch invader, and all this kind of stuff. And there was a real, I think people were gravitating back towards Brendan. They were all getting behind Brendan, and all the people weren't happy that he'd come back. And that was kind of like the peak of the season. Obviously, the two Rangers games helped when you beat them in the two games. And but then it's kind of dipped. The team's been booed. Just at the weekend, Brendan was booed for making a substitution when he took off a water for Bernardo. And it's been up and down. It really has. But it was strange because when other people started going for him, i.e. the Scottish media after his comment with Jane Lewis, it's strange that because it seemed to galvanise quite a lot of the fans. It was like, right, we're all right to have a go at him, but didn't you have a go at him? And then last night there seemed to be a different vibe about the place. Almost are coming together. Did you get that when you were in the stadium?
Definitely. And I don't think it's just because of that. I think it's because people have a real fear of not winning this title, and it's a reality that's now in front of us because we're not top of the league. The last time I was on here, we were top of the league. Mm-hmm. We're now not, and because of that last minute goal against Kilmarnock, which was a hammer blow really in terms of. It was coming the whole second half. I know you probably don't want to go over that given that there's been victories since, but that was a real low. And it was, as well as that, it was because we were playing with a back four of Ralston, Burnaby, Welsh and Scales. Now, people criticising Scales quite a lot recently.
Yeah.
I can't comment on the Motherwell game. I didn't see it. I heard it and I didn't even hear all of it. So, I can't comment on that, but Scales is a better player when Carter Vickers is next to him. There's no doubt about that. And we're far, far better with Greg Taylor at left back. There's no doubt about that. And Alistair Johnston coming back onto a game is far better than Ralston. There's no doubt about that. I mean, it's just a fact. So when you've got a stable back four, a bullish Joe Hart, who's been playing really, really well, making crucial saves at crucial times in games.
Yeah.
I was lambasted on here for defending Joe Hart. JP's defence of Joe Hart is embarrassing, apparently, according to some YouTube commenters. I mean, he's been a rock for us in the last sort of 3-4 weeks, and you wonder where we'd have been without him. But to have all that back and just to have a side that I think most people would have probably thought that's the side going to. You know, last time I was on, I was like, I don't know who the side's going to be. I don't know who's going to play in the wing. But I watched Paul, Celtic Fans TV, do his prediction, and he got it bang on. And it was the side that I would have picked as well. You know, watching him sort of go through, it was like, right, well, everybody raved about Yang's performance, so he earned his start. Idah should always be on the left for me. And Idah has played his way into starting as well. So, I mean, it was a fairly kind of, right, I get that. And I think the going into the ground last night, I think maybe there was a bit of self-reflection on some people's parts in terms of how they've reacted. Booing a 1-0 win, for example. I mean, you at this point in time, you take any win.
You would have taken that against Kilmarnock.
Right. Of course you would have. Nobody would everybody have booed at full time if we'd have won that game 1-0? I certainly hope not. But yeah, I think I said to Mark in front of me, I was like, at half time there better be a huge reaction to this performance, because if there's people in the stand that are going to boo when we win or boo when we draw, then you have to give the team huge credit for that performance in the first half, because it was just devastating. I mean, Dundee aren't a terrible side. There's been a lot of narrative again. Just cursory glance at Twitter this morning. There's been a lot, a terrible side and this, that, and the next thing. And it's like, well, geez, if you can't put 6 past a team that are in the top 6 in your league and not get credit for it, then we're on to plums, I think.
I want to pick up on that, right? Because we have streamed every single weekday since we started doing it like 4 years ago. And in that period, we've covered every game. We've also covered a number of the women's games, and it would be great if there was a B team game that we could cover that was maybe a derby or a cup final, but we've not got there yet. And we have often, JP, been described as being negative, putting a negative slant on certain things. I'm not taking it, because what I've seen after last night is negativity about certain aspects of last night's performance. The first one being Dundee, you're getting carried away. They're no great shakes. They're a terrible football team. Talk about taking the gleam of a performance that really could be turning a corner, right? Because we've been talking about false dawns all season as well. The other thing that I've heard is second half drop off. Dreadful. Imagine taking off Callum McGregor and this and that. And you're thinking, wow. Now that for me is negative. That's looking at a situation that is in no way negative and finding something to complain about, which is never really what we try to do on a Celtic State of Mind. We do pick up on certain things. I was going to bring that up, taking Callum McGregor off at half-time, for example, right? How can it possibly be a negative, right? When you're bringing on an 18-year-old and Daniel Kelly, who goes on to score his first senior goal in his second appearance. How on earth can it be a negative when all we ever do here is criticise the youth development at this football club and say we don't promote youth enough? You're beating Dundee 6-0, JP. When will you bring on a youth player? That if you don't do it then, when will you ever do it? So I get that people are saying, remember the time we lost the league on the last day of the season. And if you rewound about a month, we played Dundee and we conceded a last-minute goal. Let us know in the comments if you can remember who scored that. I'm going to say Lee Wilkie. I'm sure it was Lee Wilkie that scored. We absolutely pummeled him. I think it was 6-2 that night.
Centre-half, big, tall centre-half.
Yeah.
He played for Dundee United as well.
He did. He played for both Dundee teams, didn't he? And I'm sure he scored. It was a scrappy last-minute goal for Dundee when we were 6-1 up. And we lost the league on goal difference. Right, so everybody focuses on the last day of the season, but you think, right, if that Wilkie goal hadn't been conceded, we would have won the goal.
Was that the game when Mjallby hit one in from on the line?
He did.
Aye, that was into the Jock Stein. I remember that. Yeah.
Aye. So I get that. I get that side of the argument. I know that every goal's a prisoner right now, and absolutely get it. But I think there needs to be a balance on that, because Callum McGregor needs a rest, and I think that Carter Vickers came off and Taylor came off for the same reason. I've been saying over the last few weeks, I've not been criticising Matt O'Reilly's performance because I think he needs a rest. Last night, I thought he was brilliant again.
He was man in the match last night. Yeah. The Yang thing, right, okay, I need to discuss this because my mate is all about Yang and has been banging the Yang drum, right? We're in March, pretty much. It's a leap year, but we're in March, right? Where has Yang been all season? And I'm not having that we're not in a position where we can allow players 6 months to settle into being a Celtic player, or a year in Bernabei's case. Players have to come here and do the business straight away.
Yep.
They have to. That's the demands of the club. And I got a text last night saying, "Are you in the Yang gang yet?" Right? Because I've
Yang gang.
Because wow. I've been down on him, right? Because I've not seen it from the guy, right? And I went back to him and said, I'll be in your Yang gang if he has contributed in the next 10 games and we win this league. Mm-hmm. But it's all very well having a wee purple patch. Bernardo had a purple patch in December, January, and everyone started saying, oh, sign him, 6 million, sign him. If you remember, we discussed it at the time and I said, yep, it was looking good, but this is consistency needs to be across the next 4 or 5 months. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I wouldn't be willing to part with the cash. So Yang, yes, played well last night, contributed, and looked and was dead on his feet at the end. He put everything into the game. Matt Riley scored a goal, had 2 assists, and ran the show, I thought.
Scalped the bar. What an effort that was as well, by the way.
That would have been like Armstrong's a wee bit, wouldn't it? The goal you shared for Southampton recently. But yeah, the Yang thing is... I don't know who that is. Someone's at my door. I'm not going to answer it. It's definitely not.
At least it's not a police siren, JP.
Well,
about this time, isn't it?
Oh, mercies. But the Yang thing, I'm obviously pleased for him. I'm pleased he's doing well. And I'm generally not negative about players. I try not to be, but I wasn't seeing it with him. And I was kind of fed up with the fact that he was yet another player that come in last summer and not done the business. And like I said, we're in March. Where was he at home at Motherwell? Where was he away at Hibs? Where was he at home at Kilmarnock? You know, these are all games we've dropped points in because our wingers have been absolutely terrible. So just because somebody has a good game doesn't mean to say, you know, cue the plaudits for him. I understand that, but it doesn't mean to say that suddenly he's the answer. I hope he is, and I hope he keeps his place on Sunday, and I hope we beat Hearts. And he's another standout performer. But the whole team last night were on fire, and to have 7 different goal scorers, that doesn't happen that often.
And in the second half, they were on fire at Fire Park, apparently, JP, according to your wee YouTuber. Listen, I get that, and I think that this has been the main frustration from Brendan Rodgers. If I go back to the Johan Mjällby night that we had in Glasgow in December, and we were speaking, obviously, he is someone who keeps his hand in Swedish football, and we were speaking about Lagerbielke. He said, Lagerbielke's not a Celtic player now. He said he maybe will be in the future, but he is not a Celtic player in the here and now. And I think that's the frustration of Brendan Rodgers, where he's looking at all these guys that came in the summer transfer window, and he's looking at them thinking, these guys are not ready, JP. And we do need people, I know it's a bit of a cliche, to hit the ground running. We needed the signings when Ange came in to hit the ground running, and they did.
Exactly.
We signed players, even the young guys like Idah at that time, if you consider 19 years of age, we needed him to hit the ground running, score goals, create.
Kyogo scored a hat-trick against Dundee, if you remember, at home, and then in an early Postecoglou fixture. So we weren't hanging around waiting on him to adapt, and he's come from the other side of the world as well. So, it's frustrating that it's now, like I say, March, and we're putting in a performance like that when we've had the opportunity to do that so many times against teams that are worse than Dundee.
Yeah, worse or similar level. I agree with that. And again, the frustration continues because I look at the January window. We'll come to Idah in a minute because he's a guy that just came in and boom, adapted straight off the bat. Kuhn hasn't. So Kuhn looks like maybe Yang earlier in the season. I remember a game Yang played against Motherwell at Fir Park, the first game, and he was really poor. I thought to myself, this guy's miles off it, JP. I'm now having the same kind of thoughts about Kuhn. So we can't at this moment in time wait on Kuhn to start playing well and adapting and be up for the fight. We need the players in the here and now. And I think the selection, we'll speak about Awata, we'll speak about Idah. The selection last night was the kind of guys that have shown that they're going to be able to make that impact in the first team. Really keen to know your thoughts in the comment section. 1,000 live on a Thursday afternoon, JP. It's brilliant to have you back. Tony Wilson in the background. That Celtic strip that divided opinion.
There's also a WWF Hot Rod Rowdy Roddy Piper figure bought in Glasgow, Kentucky in a Walmart.
Really?
I couldn't resist it. I was just like walking around the toy section as you do in an American Walmart.
That's my era. That's my era, JP, right? And my wee guy, who's obviously into PS5 and all that kind of stuff, he asked me to play a wrestling game. Please forgive me. I know nothing about modern wrestling. What's the guy's name? John
Cena?
Him, yes. Right, so he's a character in this game, right? He's also an actor, I believe.
I think so, yeah.
Right, I'm getting a bit...
After about 93, my wrestling period was about 88 to about 93.
Andre the Giant, the Ultimate Warrior, Rowdy Roddy Piper, all the guys. Hey, I'm the same, right? Bret the Hitman Hart with the shades and everything. Right, so I'm playing this game with a wee fella. Sorry, I'm digressing here in the comments. I will come back to you in a moment. And the following day, I'm a bit dubious about social media, your phone's listening to you. I'm not a paranoid Android. He started following me on Twitter the following day. The real guy, the actual guy, right? So maybe he's a mad Tim, I don't know, right? But he starts following me on Twitter, and I'm like, wait a minute, this must be a bot. It must be a bot that if you're talking about this guy, he knows about it. There you go. Watch what you say when your phone's out. Who's the snitch? Also, Eamon Holmes follows me as well. I don't know if that's because I was standing up for Brendan Rodgers. Who's the snitch? Hail, who's the strangest guy that follows you on Twitter? There's a question. Let us know in the comment section. JP? Or the most surprising?
I mean, nah, nobody really. Like, I don't have any remarkable I mean,
all the remarkable ones.
I loved when Simon Donnelly followed me on Twitter. That was a big deal for me. Since got to know him, which is pretty cool. But I'd say Simon Donnelly.
By the way, I'm not sitting here going, "Oh, friend to the stars." I've not even got a clue who the guy is, right? But I do think there's something going on with phones that talking about people, and then there's a bot that maybe starts following you on social media. So watch out. Who's the snitch? Hail, hail, gentlemen, and hail, hail to you as well. Jungle Lion, our regular contributor. If Celtic win this league, it'll be Rodgers' best league win. Yank of that, JP. Certainly his most difficult one.
Yeah, it has to be, because he's taken over from a guy who's left to manage in the top 4, top 6 in England, and is doing well in that league, and left a legacy of 5 trophies out of 6. It's a pretty hard act to follow, even if you are Brendan Rodgers, who won 7 trophies in his first spell. And obviously coming in, I don't know, it didn't feel like it was the same as when he came in to take over Ronnie Dyla's team. It just, like, with Ronnie Dyla's team, it felt like he had a couple of bars that he could move up himself, whereas I don't know where the bars were, because we lost players and we didn't have a good transfer window either, which was either to do with him or not to do with him, and I don't think it was to do with him. I think those players were lined up, and he didn't have really a great deal of say in those signings. Adam Idah looks like his signing. Kuhn, well, the jury's out on him at the moment. Everyone's saying he's terrible. Again, I haven't seen every single game he's played, but he's not had good report cards so far. But
no.
That, you know, you want players that the manager wants, and I just think that it's been disjointed all season. He's struggled with injury. We've beaten Rangers twice when it's mattered. It's the other games where we've not had the players available that we normally would have that has led to the poor performances and poor results. It's pretty much straightforward, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm going to throw 3 aspects of Rodgers' second tenure that I think have worked against him. Maybe mitigating circumstances, you might call them, right? The first one, and people might say, listen, this is always the way, it's always going to be the case. The injuries we've had has been absolutely shocking, right? I mean, to the point where we needed an emergency signing at centre-half because we had so many centre-halves out. It continues to now because Hatate's out, Nawrocki was working his way into the side. He's out. So I think it's a mitigating circumstance. It's something at any level of football you need to deal with, but I'm going to throw it in there. I think another thing has been the signings, mainly in the summer, where you bring in 9 guys, not sure which players were Rodgers players. People tend to think Phillips because obviously he came from English football, a bit like Idah, and you know that Rodgers knows that market. But most of the guys weren't Rodgers signings. I mean, everybody knows that. Tillio, we'd been tracking him for 2 years, for example. So there's that. And then you've got the situation with Idah, who I had tipped as being one of the best players under Rodgers at the beginning of the season. And he's not really been able to utilise them. We all know the reasons behind it. So I think there are mitigating circumstances that if at this moment in time, not only are we rolling up the sleeves, JP, but we're getting a wee bit of flair out of the squad. And some of the guys that might have been written off earlier on, like Yang, are coming to the fore. Idah, written off when he got signed as a third choice Norwich striker and all this palaver, really making an impact and a positive contribution to the team. Carter Vickers comes back for injury, slots right in there. Iwata, reintroduced, looks like he's played that position his whole life for Celtic. And then it all comes together. It all comes together. And maybe that happens, and by the end of the season, you win the league or you win the double, and you think, wow, it almost kind of backs against the wall campaign. Shouldn't have been. I don't think it should have been, JP, but even if we had, if we had signed well in the summer, a lot of the other mitigating circumstances are washed away because you've got the personnel in the door to cover the injuries. You've got the personnel in the door to cover Idah. And I think that, we might have just got through that rocky period. Are there any concerns, though, that it's another false dawn? Because we've been here before, not quite with the performance that we've seen last night, but we've been speaking on a Thursday and we're quite buoyed by a result or a performance. And then, we've seen the other side of the Celtic side. I just get the feeling we're not going to get that. I think Carter Vickers is key to this, by the way, the fact he's back. But I do feel as though we've turned a corner.
The whole back four is key. Like, we drop points whether you like it or not, or whether people like it or not, we dropped points because we had Burnaby playing left back. It was his man.
He's not even on the bench now.
Exactly. Of course he's not. The guy's not a Celtic player. I mean, there's people starting to kid themselves on and be like, "Oh, it was good. He was good in that game. He was good." No, he wasn't. He's terrible.
I know.
He's not a good footballer, and he's not made for this league.
Where does he go from here? I think that shows you the type. It's like Sorrow. People used to go on about Sorrow, right? He had a wee purple patch under Lenny. Spurs were interested. Honestly, Google that one. Spurs were interested. £6 million was being touted. We ended up getting rid of him for like 200 grand, and he plays in Israel now. You know, so I sometimes look at where the player goes after Celtic, and that shows you his level. Where does Burnaby go?
Many, many, many examples of players that have left Celtic and their careers immediately just went. Dembele's playing at Blackpool. Do you know what I mean? I mean, Cam Loco, not Musa. But even then, Musa is playing in Saudi Arabia. Like it's that people criticise me before for saying, "Oh, you would do that if you could get paid that sort of money and all the rest of it." I'm like, I don't know if I would. Like,
well, Jota is a.
Matt O'Reilly could have gone to Turkey. Matt O'Reilly could have gone to Turkey for a fortune in January. Did he go? No, because he's got a sensible head and sensible people behind him who are probably saying, You get that move now, but you wait and get another move further down the line.
I'm glad you brought it up. I'm glad you brought it up, JP, because you've been off for a couple of weeks and there's a narrative. There's that word again. There's a klaxon. There's a narrative around O'Reilly having his head turned. And I never mentioned a move to Turkey. But if, for example, people knew that and that he knocked it back and it was life-changing money that was being spoken about, they maybe realise it's nothing to do with having his head turned. He could have gone to Spain. He could have gone to Turkey. He decided to stay at Celtic.
Aye, absolutely. It's like I don't think the head turning thing is at all a factor. I think the whole team hasn't been playing well. There's been very apparent people questioning the captain, people questioning Scales, who's been an ever present in the team this season. I just think this team needs everybody at full strength. It needs all the players available that should be the number one picks, and then you see the true mettle of everybody. And I know that you maybe then argue, oh, but you need players to pull everybody else up by the socks when there is glaring holes in the team. But you can't. Matt O'Reilly had no control over Burnaby losing his man in that game against Kilmarnock. That was a game we should have won, and concentration was gone at that point. The second half in that game, everybody was all over the place, and unfortunately for Burnaby, he was the one that actually was completely at fault for the goal. But I think that the head turning thing's a non-starter. I don't think that was ever the case. And then you see last night the true talent of the guy. I mean, that ball for my Idah was like that was my favourite of last night's goals. Just the way that it got played about, and then Idah banged it out to, I think, Johnston, or maybe it was to O'Reilly, and then O'Reilly just played that cutting pass to Idah, and then Idah takes the boy out with a chop and then smacks it in at the bottom left corner, and everybody in the whole ground is just like, how can Idah do that? But yeah,
I know.
But yeah, like be so uncontrolled at other times. But there's other times in the first half as well where, or maybe it was the second half. It was the second half. I think Dundee were sort of looking to go forward, and Idah was just pressing them so much and just getting stuck in and really being a nuisance. And that's what he is good at. When he does something like last night, that's just, I find that as a bonus. But you've got him on the park to do the work that he does that nobody else can do. Really, nobody else has got that engine to.
They don't
Around and just be an absolute pest and a pain in the proverbial.
He's a menace, and I love that about him. And I said on Twitter, I think a week or two ago, he'd been my start 11 every single week. Every week, JP, and you put up with the bits that he's not so great at. And, for every cross that ends up in Rose Ed, right, you've got that cross where he puts the ball right on Jota's head against Rangers, where he reacts and nobody else does. And for every time a shot hits the Green Brigade, you've got that bit of skill yesterday, or the goal he scores at Easter Road. He does have it in his locker. He really does. And I just, he's one of the guys, I just think if he works on instinct, he's all right. If he's got a second to think about it, he'll fluff it. He'll fluff his lines. But even if he's fluffing his lines, he puts in that work that no one else can. He does press them. He gives them no time at the back, forcing them to maybe play it long when they didn't want to, losing the ball, creating space. I've said it before and I say it again. He's always going to divide opinion. He's probably, of all the guys we've got in the team at the moment, when we look back on this side, I think he's the one that you'll think was a bit of a cult hero. The one that divides opinion, JP. I think Maedah's in there. Kenneth Macaulay, welcome. You're watching on YouTube. Hello from Kooralbyn, is that it? Queensland, Australia. Never been. Would love to visit. But thank you for tuning in. And Paddy Lavery, another regular on the Acsom streams. It's okay being happy with the performance last night, but nothing is won yet. Yep, absolutely. Brown Warrior, Paddy, if we can back this win up with another good performance and result versus Hearts, then hopefully we might see the real Celtic turn up for the title push now. One of the things I want to talk about is Idah, who I've mentioned, and Idah, who scored yesterday. Brilliant assist by Johnston, who's hitting peak form just at the right time. Idah, written off by a lot of people, JP, short-term loan deal, may go back to Norwich at the end of it. People think as well, when you've got somebody on a loan, if there's no option to buy, then you can't buy them. That's not the case. If you go to Norwich and make an offer, you might still buy them at the end of that. I think their insurance is what happens with Sidney Van Hooijdonk. If Sidney Van Hooijdonk does well with Norwich and they buy him, then they might be willing to sell Idah. But I think he brings a lot to that forward line. And it pains me to say it. It seems to suit him better than it suits Kyogo, the way we're playing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, if you remember back to last time I was on, we were talking about him, I think before he'd signed, he was just being linked. And I'd looked up that guy from the Norwich City podcast who said when he was being linked with Verona, that if he was to go to Verona, he'd be worth... if he go to Verona, the deal that was in place to sign him, at the end of that, there was an option to buy for the Verona deal, which was on the table, and it was the fee was £3 million. That guy said, I would be disappointed if we were only getting £3 million. I'd be looking for double that. And I said at the time, before he kicked the ball for Celtic, that made me optimistic, because you're watching somebody that does what we do, and passionate about Celtic, and going online, and you don't want to appear like you're a clown and you don't know what you're talking about. I'm not saying I know what I'm talking about, but I listened to a guy who watched him. It's like if we were sending somebody. I mean, if somebody from West Brom was to ask us about Mikey Johnson,
exactly,
we'd probably say it's just not worked out for him at Celtic. The guy's got talent. That might be his level. And then you look at it, he's banging in goals for West Brom and he's doing well there. So there would be an honest assessment of Mikey Johnson that way. And then the other way, there was clearly an honest assessment from this guy in the Norwich City podcast saying he's always rated Idah. Would have probably sent him out on loan before now, but he was kept as backup to the front two that they had. And he was wanting £6 million for him. Adam Idah right now is looking like a £6 million player for Celtic. There's no two ways about it. The guy has dug us out at Easter Road with 2 penalties. Yeah. He's scored 2 goals on Sunday. 2 goals on Sunday at Fir Park when we needed an equaliser in that game to bring us back to life. And we needed him. We didn't necessarily need him last night, but it was good for him to get his first goal at Celtic Park and also to showcase his strength. And just, it's amazing to have a different dynamic. I mean, it doesn't necessarily signal the end of the road for Kyogo, far from it. I mean, you saw how excited Kyogo was for Daniel Kelly last night when he scored. Mm-hmm. I think, people are thinking Kyogo's feeling sorry for himself, and maybe there is an element of that, but we all know what Kyogo can do, and we've seen what he's done in the past. And I don't think that Adam Idah starting last night means it's the end of the road for Kyogo. I was a bit disappointed for him. He didn't get a goal to join in with the rout last night. It seems as everybody else got one, almost. But I mean, Idah, the temperament Idah showed in these games and the coolness to finish that second goal against Motherwell. I mean, that was top drawer finishing from him. The header was obviously brilliant as well, but the crucial one was the winner, and like that composure. I mean, that's the experience of playing week in, week out. I mean, he's not a guy that's not kicked the ball. He's played a lot of games, hasn't he? I mean, he's 22. He's experienced to an extent. So he's not really a project. At 22, you're a ready-made player, and you're kind of not as good as you're ever going to be, but you're certainly at a higher level than other players of a similar age. There's other players that have not played anywhere near the level of football that he's played up until now.
I think you look at him as a ready-made player, because if we categorise signings, for example, JP, into the two categories, the one for the future, the development, the project, whatever you want to call them, and then the player that can go right into the team and make an impact. And you start thinking about guys like Tilly. Oh, he's young. He's the same age. He's 22 years of age. Yang, same age. You know, Kuhn's older. But I think that also when you're looking at the minutes he's played, he's now a goal or assist every 59 minutes in a Celtic jersey. That's brilliant. You know, scoring headers, fantastic, because we've been playing that type of ball all season. You know, Greg Taylor and Johnston now all of a sudden are getting loads of assists, and I think that he shut a lot of people up. There's been a few critical voices on Acsom and elsewhere in relation to the type of signing that he was, but if he continues with this...
By the way, I also did say that the optics didn't look good in it, that we were signing a third choice striker from Norwich City, but I was absolutely prepared to give the guy the benefit of the doubt and not be overly negative, or you know, why are we signing this guy and everything else. It is clearly a Brendan Rodgers signing, and all I've ever said since Brendan Rodgers has come in is that you want the signings to be the manager's signature on the contract. You don't want another person who's, you know, a nameless person who presents this player to the manager, and then he's kind of like, well, I'll just take what I'm given, you know, and kind of happy-go-lucky and all the rest of it. It can't be like that. It's got to be the manager's players.
Rubber stamp. You said that in January. He goes, listen, if they come in and it's Rodgers' players, I'm happy with them. I think that Rodgers sometimes is a victim of his own self-belief when it comes to what he can do with a player. You know, I always use Kundai Benyu as an example. You talk about a player and where they go after their Celtic career. He's now without a club, but he was like playing 9th or 10th tier in England at Wealdstone. You know, that's his level. Yeah,
was he at Wealdstone? Was he?
Yeah,
Wealdstone Raider. Remember him? You got no fans.
That's right. That's right. He played with him. He played with his team. And Brendan thought he was Champions League level. He played them in 2 Champions League games. So sometimes I think Brendan can be a victim of his own self-belief, in that he thinks he can take a player and work his magic with them, you know. And I always use Benyu as an example of that. But Idah, for me, 22 years of age, if he was to keep this up, and if he did, it would be incredible if he did, but, you know, a goal or an assist every hour. By the end of the season, it's going to be a difficult one for Celtic. There'll be other teams interested. I mean, you're then looking at something like £6 million, JP, and then there's a decision to be made. 22-year-old still, obviously, with regards to Celtic's model, there's a sell-on value and all this kind of stuff. If he fires us to the top of the league and wins us the league with his goals and his assists, buy him. You know, well, because
that's when the real criticism would come in, because if there was a transparency that he wanted to come, the manager wanted them, and Celtic weren't willing to pay £6 million for him, then get the Sharks out at that point, because that would be ridiculous. But how will we ever know if that's going to be the case?
It's brilliant that became a thing, eh? Get the Sharks out. Everybody knows what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Like fans.
I wish they didn't, because I wish that didn't happen, because it was horrendous at the time. But I mean, if he wants to come to Celtic, and Celtic
make
and
it
the manager wants him, then I've definitely seen enough. And I know that might fly in the face of, oh, well, Bernardo had a purple patch and not too sure about him now. Yang's had an all right game. There's something about this guy that makes you think that he could do this over the course and distance of a season. And again, if there is other clubs interested, then we need to use the fact that we've got him in the door as an advantage, and the fact that he's experienced, scoring for Celtic, Irishman, from Cork. I mean, must be an amazing feeling. I mean, he said when he signed, like, I've always wanted to play for Celtic, and his, you know, his family and all that, Celtic fan. I mean, speaking of that, the guy that sits in front of me, Mark, when Daniel Kelly came on at half time, said, "It's like East Kilbride boy. I know his father. His dad's
right?
Apparently his dad's called Peachy, and all massive Celtic fans. And his dad and his mates have got a bar in one of their back gardens, and they call it Jake's Bar. So it's like one of these cabin efforts. And Daniel Kelly's been going in and watching Celtic games in that bar since he was like 5-6 years old. Obviously not drinking, but so to them, for them last night, you can only imagine how amazing that must have been to see their boy come on for a start to replace the captain at half time, and then score with his weaker foot into the top bin to seal a 7-0 victory. And also it got me thinking this morning, to hear the Magnificent Seven again at Celtic Park was like, I got full body shivers hearing that again, because, you know, it's just takes you back to when you used to hear it all the time when Larsson would smack them in. But when Daniel Kelly was born, Henrik Larsson was halfway through his second season at Barcelona, which is very, very grim for folk like me and you.
And it's going to get grimmer just as we get older, let's be honest, right? But again, some people see the name Kelly, and you've got to remember how synonymous that name is with Celtic's history. And I'm not just talking about, you know, the ex-board. James Kelly was the first captain at Celtic, and it's I'm a traditionalist. I don't know if there was any relation, but the name Kelly was part of Celtic from our formation right through to 1994. There was Kellys at the club, either on the park or in the boardroom. So Daniel Kelly continues that association with the name, and I thought it was brilliant. And apparently that's his bad foot. And the reaction of Brendan Rodgers when he scored the goal, don't know if you've seen it, JP, maybe this morning watching it back. He was genuinely delighted, wasn't he, when he turned round to John Kennedy after that goal?
Yeah, he was, and he's been, see the fact that you've just seen his name on the bench quite a lot.
Yeah,
he's obviously, I mean, biggest vote of confidence is putting him on at half time in a game to replace the captain straight away. But in the weeks leading up to this, he's been on the bench, so there's a place, and given how bloated our squad is, a place on the Celtic bench is fairly. I mean, was O on the bench last night? I don't think he was.
No, Owen Bernabe
no Bernabe either.
Yeah.
So there's so many players at the club getting a place on the bench, but getting on a place on the bench as a youngster and then getting the faith of the manager to come on is huge. So I know that we're always critical of players leaving, like Ben Doak and Liam Morrison going to Bayern Munich, and obviously there's other examples as well. But you know, once every so often somebody comes along, you know, that could be a first team player, i.e. Kieran Tierney, i.e. Callum McGregor, and maybe Daniel Kelly's the next one. I would love to think so, especially when you know that he's from a Celtic supporting family and he's a Celtic supporter himself. Like Mark said, he would have been, if he wasn't in the squad, he'd have been here watching the game as a fan. That's like you do want that in the team, and it raises a player's game, I would say. I mean, if I was playing for Celtic, I would be running through brick walls. Do you know what I mean?
I think you need an element. I think you need a nucleus of players of that ilk. They've obviously got to be good enough, JP, but to have them coming through a system. I think Brendan Rodgers said that Kelly had been at Celtic since he was 8. Mm-hmm. He's been at the club a decade already. You know, that's insane. But to know the inner workings of the club, the standards, you know, what is expected, what is the expectations of a football club like Celtic, to know the fabric of the club, what it means if they come from a Celtic support, what it means to so many people worldwide, you know, every single game, you know, and you do get people come in and who don't buy into it. They don't recognise what it means for so many people. It's a job. You know, it's a job and it's a stepping stone, and they'll move on or they'll be a flop. They'll get their wages anyway. But for people like that, and it was Pat Stanton, when we were interviewing Pat Stanton for the Nearly Mocking documentary, which is up there somewhere on the shelves, and he spoke about every team. He says he believed every team should have it. Fergie always had that. you know, the core group of guys that came through both Aberdeen and Manchester United. They said it's so vital. You're talking sometimes percentages, margins, JP, margins between failure and success. And he believed, Pat Stanton believed, that often it's the homegrown players that give you that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when you get to that stage in your career and you get given an opportunity and you've got evidence right next to you on the pitch in Callum McGregor of somebody who's done the exact same thing as you, then if you had any doubts over your ability, or if you had any kind of like, oh, is football for me, or am I good enough? At that point, you're like, right, just push through and just keep going, and you could potentially become a first team player at Celtic. I mean, don't like to talk about it, but look at the boy McCausland at Rangers. I mean, he's a first team player at Rangers now. I mean, there's an argument there whether or not he's going to be the finished article, or I mean, obviously they're talking about him as a £20 million player. I don't think anybody's been saying that about Daniel Kelly. I would hope not yet, because you don't want that pressure on your shoulders. But you need to have, there needs to be evidence of players coming through the youth academy. Otherwise, what's the point?
We've been critical of it, JP, and I've not done my research yet, but I will, because I keep asking the question, in the last 20 years, how many of the graduates have made 50 or more appearances for the first team? I think it's something that needs to be focused on. We've got a great tradition of producing footballers all the way back. You know, we've always produced footballers, and I think it dried up a wee bit in the 90s, but everything did at Celtic, didn't it? And we stopped producing the same calibre of player, and a few came through and did all right. But I think it's something that legitimately we need to focus on. And every season, you look at that now, right? Who we got? Frame, Rocco Vata, Daniel Kelly. Just have a pocket of players coming through every season, and then give them the game time. And this is a big thing. There was criticism because, listen, I'm a football fan. I would have loved to have seen Celtic winning 9 or 10-0 last night. I would have loved it, right? Turn the screw and go for it. But if you do that, you don't bring on Daniel Kelly, JP. So it's kind of short-termism to a degree. I know that we're chasing goal difference. I'm glad we brought him on last night.
100%. But as the players were coming off throughout that second half, or at half-time in the case of McGregor, this is a game of snooker we're playing. And Rodgers is thinking 3-4 shots ahead of us. And thank God he is, because we've got a game against Hearts at Tynecastle on Sunday at midday. And it's one of those, an early kick-off at Tynecastle, it can go either way in terms of the players being ready. And if you've got players who've had a bit more rest in themselves before that game, and you've had the ability to do that on your own terms, like it was a case of right, let's get the captain off. I mean, the guy next to me, that sits next to me, he was like, I'd get Carter Vickers off at half-time as well. And I was like, I mean, I don't know about that, but maybe give him 10 minutes of the second half and then take him off. But I mean, he was obviously so concerned over Carter Vickers on a wet pitch where it's heavy legs and everything else, and you want to protect him because, yeah, Hearts, they got gubbed last weekend off Rangers, which was no real surprise. Anybody thinking they were going to go there and do anything was probably, that optimism was misplaced, I would say. But I heard someone talking about Hearts season ticket holder even said that it's embarrassing how much more they try against Celtic than they do against Rangers. Like, and that's from a season ticket holder. So why somebody would choose to say that and not actually believe it, I don't know. The frustrating thing for me is, can I get a ticket?
I know.
And they better sell out their allocation on Sunday, because they didn't the last time. They looked like clowns for doing so. There was all these excuses on Twitter, oh, the kick-off time, oh, the weather, oh, the sectarianism from the away end, oh, this, oh, that. You're either a football supporter of a club or you're not. Don't rhyme off excuses. It was absolutely battering down with rain last night. It was freezing. I was still on American time. Did it stop me from going to the game? No, because I support my team. So all these excuses that get run out about, and then Hibs are apparently now going to cut our
I was just going to say it, JP. We are the world's worst, right, at cutting our nose off in this country when it comes to football. We've got a game, we've got a league that is over-supported. Over-supported. Scottish football's an anomaly when it comes to attendance, right? You see it all the time. And a big part of that is obviously the attendances at Ibrox and Celtic Park every week, right? However, people like this dude, did you see him this morning getting interviewed? This is a prerogative. Did you see him? That was his word of the day, because he used it about 3 times in a minute, right? To talk about why they're not going to let Celtic fans in the stadium. And you think, as a football fan, and you're looking at the way that we're continually just tripping ourselves up in this country, as a football nation, a football supported nation, it really is. It's like, pot will eat itself. We are that snake eating itself. You know what I mean? And you look at people like that and you think, who even are you? And you're going to be affecting Celtic support from getting tickets. But Scottish football as a whole, I just don't get it. And I do think that Celtic fans are targeted. We spoke about the police action against Celtic fans at Fir Park as well. I do think we're targeted more than other football clubs and other football fan bases as well, JP.
Well, saw the highlights this morning of the Livingston game last night. It's no wonder they give us 3 stands, because there wasn't even 1 stand full of their ground last night. Was
there no 1,500 attendance at Livingston this season at some point? 1,500. I'm not being funny, right, JP, but you've done gigs with more people in them. You've put gigs on it. I've done events with more people in the audience. 1,500. That is pathetic for a Scottish Premiership club.
I'll not shed any tears for them going down. And with apologies to my friend Scott, who's a diehard Livingston fan, and my mate Christopher as well. But it's just it was embarrassing seeing those highlights last night, and that they're in our league, and like I said, no wonder they give us these stands when they come to play us, because that's a cash bonanza for them to get that. Now, I'm not suggesting that Hearts give us 2 stands or anything else, but it's absolutely pathetic that they've taken away half of that stand and we get this wee pocket, and then they've got their banner covering loads of seats to split the home support from the away support. And then they were blowing their own trumpet about how they've sold out all their home games. And like I said, they better sell out this Sunday, because if there's patches around that ground on Sunday, then their argument falls flat, because it was all about, we can sell out our own ground and we don't need you and this, that and the next thing. And then lo and behold, the last game against us, they didn't. And they looked like clowns. And it's just so frustrating when the team, off the back of last night, everybody's so sort of G'd up after last night, and you're like, right, next game, I can't get a ticket. Why? Because they've only given us 600 tickets or 700 tickets or something.
Because Scottish football's run like a bowling club.
I might never see Tynecastle at a league game again at this rate, because the people that are going on Sunday are the hardcore and go week in, week out. They were there at Motherwell on Sunday. I was in America. So I immediately, as soon as you miss a game, you drop down the pecking order for a ticket. And so I don't have any arguments with the people who get those tickets. It's just annoying that there isn't more to go around like there are at other away games. And
Remember Barry Hearn? Remember Barry Hearn looked at Scottish football, JP, and he was absolutely amazed at how poor, as a football nation, how poor we were actually serviced by the authorities. He said that there should never be an empty seat in a stadium. And the people that are running these football clubs aren't doing their job properly. And then what might happen is people try to get tickets to get into the stadium. They end up in the wrong end. I mean, you're actually pushing fans into that scenario.
I've done that at Pittodrie. I'm not sure I would do it at Hearts, although I did inquire when we could have won the league at Hearts. Was it last season or maybe the season before? I did make some inquiries to some Hearts supporting folk I knew to ask if they could get me a home end ticket, and I was given short shrift back. I mean, that's their prerogative, but being in the home end at Hearts would be thoroughly unpleasant, I think. I mean, you have to have nerves of steel to be able to keep your cool with some of the stuff that they come out with, I'm sure.
Mind the book, was it Heartfelt? It was a Hibs fan who went to watch Hearts for an entire season and wrote a book about it. I'm sure it's called Heartfelt. Yeah, go and check it out. Forward by Irvin Welsh, Heartfelt it's called. No, you're absolutely right. And I just think, in what other industry, in the theatre, in the arts, music, would you turn away fans who want to buy a ticket for your event. It's unbelievable. Honestly, Scottish football will always shoot itself in the foot.
But yet we'll get called entitled, and it's our prerogative. I mean, I asked my mate Smiley about the St Mirren game. I was like, where was all the fans that were there on the 2nd of January? And he was just like, it was a kick-off time, and they don't like, that's a family stand, because it was the stand opposite where we were. And he was like, that's a family stand. They don't like coming to games against Celtic. And he was like, well, give us that stand then. Move the 200 or 150 people that were in that stand scattered around into the spaces that are in these stands, and give us both stands. And then it's like, oh, well, that's giving you an advantage because you've got fans behind both goals. Oh my God, you're either a good football team or you're not. You know what I mean? You're either take points off us or you're not. It's like the fans being there. I'm sorry, I've seen us lose at Livingston with 3 stands full of Celtic fans. So that argument doesn't wash for me.
No. And talking about advantage, if you want a financial advantage, then be a business. Sell tickets. Sell tickets when you can. One final point from Ewan Boy Martin. Brendan is starting to win me back. Now, Ewan has been talking about Brendan Rodgers all season, but he's starting to win him back after last night's game. We need to keep it up until the end of the season and win the double. It will be a satisfying league win.
I saw Ewan last night from a distance. He was walking along the front of the North Stand, I think, with his daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was far too far away to give him a shout, but I definitely recognised him.
The big fella. Ewan and I will have an announcement very soon. Watch this space. Listen, it's been absolutely brilliant to get JP back on for his thoughts on all things Celtic. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. If you're on the YouTube and you haven't subscribed, give us a subscribe. Hit the like and the notifications buttons as well. Loads coming on the channel very, very soon. Cult hero Paul Byrne will be speaking to Acsom tomorrow. I'll be in Glasgow speaking to Burnsy, and hopefully we'll have that video up over the weekend. So keep an eye out for that as well. Thank you all for getting involved in the comments section, and thank you to JP Mason for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.